What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. We have a pretty fun interview that we're going to be playing that I had with Dennis Schmitz last night, which actually, as you can see, he is down in the chat, so this is awesome. Welcome, Dennis. Hopefully you got some much-needed rest after our interview and your busy day yesterday. So, welcome to LUMIX Live. These are weekly broadcasts that we do every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will either bring some people in to interview, talk about different kinds of topics, in which case today it's actually about color grading. Not a fully in-depth conversation about color grading, but Dennis was gracious enough to share some of his time with us so that we could kind of talk about Resolve and some of the ways to work with footage and some tips and some different tricks there too. So really cool basic layer of information that we're going to be able to talk about today. Otherwise we'll have, tech conversations about products and just really kind of back and forth with the entire community. So if you've been joining us for a while, you kind of know the drill already. If you have a question during the stream, tag at LUMIX Cameras in the question. We'll be able to see it and be able to kind of answer it while we're playing the interview that we had. Before we jump into that, I want to remind everybody about LUMIX Pro Services. We have Pro Services here in the US and in many other countries as well. In the US, we have Red and Platinum. Red is a free tier of service that if you have purchased a LUMIX camera, follow the QR code or the link down in the description. Get yourself registered on it. You get your 3-year warranty with it here in the States. If you're somebody who likes a little bit higher level of service and back-end support with your equipment, make sure to take a look at the LUMIX Pro Service Platinum level. This gets you 2-day repairs with free next-day shipping both ways. You get 20% off out of warranty repairs, so if something's dropped or broken, things like that wouldn't be a warranted covered repair, you get a discount on that. You also get some annual sensor cleanings and firmware updates and service and stuff, so if you go back and forth where you want your equipment in tip-top shape before your season starts, this is a really nice, good program to have for that. And then if you're like me and some others where you much prefer to be able to speak to someone on the phone with some service-related issues, the Platinum service does have an exclusive hotline that you would be able to call into during normal operating hours, which would be 9 to 5 East Coast time here in the U.S. So yes, if you're interested in those, links are down in the description. The QR codes were up on the screen before, so you can always take a look at that. Let's take a look at some of the questions that came in before we jump right into the interview here. One of the first ones, Noxstrom, is Cinelike D for color grading or used straight out of camera? So this is going to be one that's probably back and forth depending on what your end goal is for the project. Can you use Cinelike D and D2 out of camera? Sure, of course you can. You can use pretty much any profile directly out of camera and, kind of work it. Is it necessarily the right way to work with footage? Not always. And Dennis and I talk about that a little bit in the interview. But truthfully, Cinelike D and D2, when they were designed as a very kind of like closer to finished kind of color profile to work with, where you'd really only maybe have to put some finishing touches onto it. And it's going to depend on whether or not you're thinking about using it for photography or if you're going to be using it for video. In photography, I know Dennis and I were talking about this before, Cinelike D2 can be a really powerful stills color profile, even though it was derived for the videography market. But the only color profile that you wouldn't want to use right out of camera, or you shouldn't use right out of camera, is obviously Vlog. That is designed to be graded. So if you were to just deliver flat-looking Vlog footage, that definitely would not be a deliverable for anybody. Let's see here. Is there any possibility to have live view composite on the GH6? And also would be nice to have auto on-off for dynamic range boost depending on the ISO values. At this point, I honestly don't know about live view composite on the GH6. Given it is a new sensor and a new engine that we're using in that camera, a new processor that we're using in that camera, I don't have a close enough link to know what the challenges would be in bringing a feature like that into the newer platform. We do have it existing on our, the S5 and some of the other cameras like G95 that are running on previous generation processors that we've worked with. So my best guess is that it's probably down to whether or not we can translate it up into the new processor and how long that process would take. As far as an auto on-off for dynamic range boost, we can pass that on to the engineering team. I don't know what the feasibility of that coming anytime soon would be. So let's see here. I think, Dennis, you answered Buck's question there. At least I'm pretty sure you did. Yeah. What else here? Ulrich, is there any official statement about the 200mm f2.8 or why the 9mm f1.7 is so hard to get? As far as the 200mm 2.8, honestly, I'm not sure. A lot of websites tend to have some issues where, like, you know, when they run out of inventory, they flip it to unavailable or discontinued for some reason. We don't have control over that. That's up to how the dealer or the website decides to label their out-of-stock inventory. I haven't heard anything personally about it, so honestly, I don't know. As far as the 9mm goes, the 9mm is hard to come by because basically we can't keep enough of them in stock. As that lens is produced, it's pretty much sold. So if you are on a back order list and you're waiting for the lens, it's coming. It's just a matter of the demand on that lens has been so crazy that, yeah, I mean, which makes sense. It's a focal length that hasn't existed in Micro Four Thirds, so or at least in autofocus native Micro Four Thirds. So yeah, it has been a little tough to get a hold of, pretty much almost anywhere that you look. So, but yeah, again, if you have a pre-order for it, definitely keep your pre-order. Or your back order on it. Make sure you're keeping up with your local dealer, because at that point it comes down to, is the dealer ordering enough to fulfill your back order, as we can just be producing and sending these lenses out to them. So let's see here. Good morning, Richard. Let's see here. Excellent holiday. Here that's gonna cover the story. Oh. Definitely no problems about any of the questions that y'all want to ask. So, all right, cool. During the next segment, we're going to be playing the recorded interview that I had with Dennis last night. So we will be in the chat answering questions. So you can tag either at LUMIX Cameras or if it's a question specifically for Dennis, since Dennis is here for however long he's here. You know, obviously direct the question to the person that you want to ask. And then, yeah, we'll be coming back after this interview and continuing some questions. It's a relatively long interview, so you know, grab some popcorn, grab something to snack on while you watch this. It's definitely a lot of really cool information. So let's go to Dennis and I from last night talking about color grading and the LUMIX cameras. Yeah, Dennis, thank you for joining me for this and spending a late night over where you are, you know, to jump on here. All
good.
Before we kind of dive into just our conversation that we've been already having, like before all this part, could you let everyone know a bit about who you are, what you do, and for those of us joining us from the Facebook group, they can actually see you here.
Probably for the first time. Which is fine. I don't think I talked to everyone yet, but okay, here we start. Here we go. My name is Dennis Schmitz. I'm a filmmaker from Germany, based in Cyprus right now, but visiting my parents right now. That's also the reason why we started that late. My background has been filmmaking for like forever. I also do lots of music videos, shoot weddings, do photography, whatever my clients ask for, basically. And filmmaking, honestly, on the other hand, is something I finance with all my other jobs. So what I'm doing is I actually produce these movies with some friends also. So that's actually where basically most of my money goes, like in equipment and also filmmaking, which is something I consider not only fun, but also an investment into the future. So I can actually hopefully live with what I love to do in the near future.
That's, I think everyone that ever gets into this world, you know, isn't that always the goal? You want to be able to actually do what you love and get paid to do it. So it's always a nice thing, you know. But
yeah, that's hopefully in the near future. Right now, it's more like a side thing, but it's honestly the thing I love doing the most. Yeah.
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 Well, yeah. So, we were talking right before, we kind of started this whole thing, about, just some of the different things, and, knowing that when it comes to where I think a lot of the people in the Facebook groups and some of the chat, since you've joined us on the chat before, I think a lot of people recognize you, or at least know you of some level, because of the color grading and the help that you provide in the chats and the communities and stuff like that. So I wanted to kind of, dive into some of that stuff with you. We were talking about the various different color profiles and which ones you really love and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people always have those kinds of questions. Is like, hey, I just got like the GH6. Which color profile is best to use? Or, hey, I'm using natural color profile. Should I be using this versus, say landscape, like we were talking about? So, like, which profiles do you find? Like, does it depend on the camera that you're working with, or like, is there like typically a particular one that you like to use over all the other ones for general use?
So that is definitely a good question. So using different color profiles depends on actually what I'm doing, if it's photography, if it's filmmaking, or is it, or even right now live streaming. Because what I figured out like just a few hours before is that using Vlog with a LUT applied and then streaming everything is not necessarily the best idea. It may result in some artifacts, skin tones look kind of compressed or baked. Hard to describe, but what I did here was actually switching to my favorite Rec 709 sRGB profile for in-camera recording and also streaming, apparently, which is landscape, because that's literally the only profile which has no desaturation in the shadows, which makes skin tones actually look really rich. The only flaws I see is that dynamic range is obviously quite limited and the roll-off could be much smoother. But skin tones and colors in general actually look really good with that profile if you need something out of the camera that already looks really good. And the other profile, Rec 709, basically sRGB profile I really love to use is Cinelike D2, especially. Yeah, it has to be Cinelike D2 actually, because Cinelike D, the first iteration had its issues like orange skin tones. But Cinelike D2, when shooting photos and developing these photos in Lightroom, results in actually quite amazing results. So there's lots of color separation. There is, and if you add a little bit of contrast, you actually get the right look in like a few seconds just by applying Cinelike D2 in Lightroom instead of the regular Adobe profiles, which, to be fair, to be honest, honestly, are not that great. Actually, quite bad. Yeah, not a good start to work with. But Cinelike D2 in Lightroom is a great way to achieve amazing looking pictures on both the GH6 and the S1H and S5 and S1. Yeah, that's what I actually recently figured, because I shot a wedding, did some photography for a company over here in Germany, which is also why I'm here at the moment. Yeah. And what I definitely would recommend is avoiding the natural profile if you shoot video or photos. Just go, in case you want to have something straight out of the camera in Rec 709 that looks decent, choose the natural profile. And if you want to do some more work, you can also do the Cinelike D profile in video, but to me it's actually harder to get the colors looking right than just shooting Vlog and either use color management or a LUT that was made for the particular camera.
Yeah. I can definitely echo a lot of that. I mean, my limited experience, I'm nowhere near like, the same level as any of you that actually do color grading. But what I have found that's amazing is, the LUTs that you have, they're They're awesome. I love using those. You know, like kind of actually just working with them, because it has made the process a lot easier, especially for someone who's just, you know, kind of getting into it, but may not really know all the fine intricacies of what you have to do for color grading. It gives great results for it, and I get to shoot log. I can, you know, as long as I shoot log properly, you know, actually expose things properly.
That's a good thing actually about shooting log, honestly. If you even if you don't nail exposure in camera, you still have like so much wiggle room, especially on the S series. So you can easily overexpose it by like 2 stops, or underexpose it by another 2 or 3 stops, and you can basically just add the LUT as the last note, and do another note before where you adjust the offset, which is basically like raw exposure in this case, if you use that kind of workflow. And what would happen is that you may have some grainier shadows if you underexpose by 2 or 3 stops, but the colors actually, since it's a log profile, they still end up looking correct if you use this workflow. So you can't really go wrong with shooting log, honestly.
You know, and that's actually probably like a good segue, because I definitely want to get to this. Is that, you know, I've asked a lot of the people that I've talked to over the last, you know, probably 6 months, you know, like workflow, you know, actually taking this footage. It's one thing, like, yeah, you know, you can take almost any color profile, and you can, depending on how much effort you want to put into it, you can get them to a point where, you know, you kind of want them to be for a project to a point. But I'm very curious about like your workflow on how you approach when you get something and then you actually go through some of the grading process. I would imagine Davinci Resolve is probably your preferred program to use.
For sure. But you can still use a LUT in Premiere, but you may not have the right tools to actually adjust exposure or get the most out of the log image. So in case you use Premiere, you definitely need to make sure that your exposure is not too far off, because you may not have the right tools. And also what I noticed in Premiere is what probably everyone noticed in basically every single camera group is that you get these questions: why is there bending in my footage, even though I shot in 10-bit?
Oh, yeah.
Which is like a question that is asked like at least twice a day in every single camera group. And the usual answer is the person is using Premiere.
Usually,
that has always been the case since the GH5, honestly. We have seen that every time this question came up, it was Premiere messing up the footage. Every single time.
Yeah, definitely.
And that issue has never been fixed, and that was back in 2017. Yeah. But that's Adobe. That's a whole nother topic. So
yeah, right.
So what I would recommend, if you still want to edit in Premiere, do your edit in Premiere, clean it up, put everything on one track, export in XML, and finish in Davinci Resolve.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
So
if you still can't,
yeah. So with like the process, like when you're going through and actually like kind of working like this, you know, we'll take the, you know, Premiere side of this out. We're just working on a full Resolve, you know, kind of workflow. What kind of things would you advise or kind of guide someone that's always like, you know, kind of wanting to get into this and work with it? Are there certain like steps that you know, kind of methodically go through when you work on this footage?
So there are definitely lots of ways to get the right look out of a log profile. Would I call myself a professional colorist? Maybe semi-professional. I'm still learning, but honestly, if you're not in the process of learning and pretend you're not to, you're probably not good at your work. So everyone is learning.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's that. So, but there are definitely lots of different ways to achieve a proper look out of a log profile. And What I started doing recently, actually since 2018, is using a color manage workflow, which for me back in 2018, actually on my first feature film was ACES. And ACES provides, is a tool set, I would say. So you can, let me actually switch here to recording. So don't stop the recording. Oh, there we go. The mouse is a bit janky over here. Okay, you can see the screen?
Yeah,
All
looks
right.
great.
Okay, all right. So what I started doing back in 2018 is switching to ACES, which provides lots of tools dealing with different color spaces, different cameras, different outputs for different screens. If it's sRGB, if it's Rec 709, or even if it's HDR, you can basically just switch from one output to another without really adjusting the grade, because ACES or even RCM nowadays, Resolve Color Management, will basically just do the work for you, which is super amazing. So how I'm setting up ACES here in this case is what we have here is basically I tell, since I'm actually shooting B-RAW on my S1H, I don't really have to tell ACES that that I'm using a Panasonic camera. But if you record internally, you have to switch to, oh, that didn't go to Panasonic. It's actually the V35 profile. I guess I can't find it. This list is so messy nowadays. It's so much. There we go. There we go. We have it here. But honestly, oh my goodness, this list is getting longer and longer. While Panasonic, since 2017, it has always been like that. While other camera manufacturers add profiles for every single camera they put on the market. So this is like a really long list nowadays. So previously, actually, it helped just pushing the P button, and it literally guided you through Panasonic V35. It doesn't do that anymore. So if you shoot B-RAW on your Panasonic camera, if it's the S1H or BGH, does the BGH1 shoot B-RAW? Or if I mistake?
Yep.
Okay. So if you shoot B-RAW on any Panasonic camera, you don't really have to do this here. You don't have to apply an input transform, because ACES actually, in this case, Davinci Resolve, does the work for you. It recognizes that you were using a Panasonic camera, so it actually does the right input transformation for you. So that wasn't really necessary to do. But if you shoot on an older, let's say, what is it? Is it even older? The BGH1 is not necessarily older. It's if you shoot Vlog L on one of the older models or smaller MFT models, Micro Four Third models, you have Vlog L, which definitely is a slightly different color space. So what I had to do back then was I applied the input transform for Panasonic for Vlog, and I had to create my own transform, basically, which I made after I found some footage comparing the GH5 to the Raricam. Which really helped me to create my own transform from Vlog L to Vlog back in 2018 already. And this enabled me to use the GH5 in an ACES workflow, in a color managed workflow. That was the trick I did back then. So I didn't have to deal with pink skin tones, the reds weren't oversaturated, and all the other stuff that wasn't correct. But nowadays, if you use a GH6 or if you use an S1H, you can basically just add your camera here, or if you shoot B-RAW, you don't have to. And you can just start from there. You may still get a slight red tint on the S series, but that is definitely gone on the GH6. And yeah, and what you can also see here is once you're done with selecting your input transform, you also have to select your output transform, which in this case, to make it possible to actually stream it, I had to go to Rec 709, because if I would do an HDR output here, everything would be basically clipped, everything over 100 nits, which is quite early for HDR. So there would be so many clipped highlights. So I had to switch to Rec 709 to get a correct output for streaming. And also Rec 709 is usually the correct choice on 99% of the displays there, unless you have like proper HDR monitoring available either via Decklink, Ultra Studio, or can use one of these newer Apple screens, either on your MacBook Pro or the XDR screen, the big. I don't even know how big the screen is, but it's super expensive.
Like the desk one that's got like all the circles in the back and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you have like a proper HDR screen which can reach at least 600 nits, then you can and which is connected to an Ultra Studio or on a Mac or Decklink. Unless you have that, you should just select Rec 709 and you're good to go. If you want to really do HDR, you need one of these screens. You can even, they literally just released the beta version of Davinci Resolve for the iPad. And if you have one of these 12.9-inch iPads, you can also use the HDR reference mode and actually do an HDR color grade. I got feedback from another colorist yesterday who told me that it's actually working, which is insane.
That's impressive.
Yeah, you can do an HDR color grade basically on a tiny iPad.
Jeez.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So yeah, but in our case, since I'm streaming here, we go for Rec 709, and this is our setup. This is also something I really love about Asus. It's super easy. You don't really have too many options. So let me actually show what happens when you use DaVinci Color Management, the RCM. The Davinci Resolve Color Management, which is this one here. So what happens here is it pretends to be simple, but all the settings it provides are actually quite incorrect. You should never rely on that. Nothing really works like this. So you basically have to turn off the automatic color management, then you have to scroll down and set it to custom, and then it gets really funky. So here you definitely, if you shoot B-RAW or any other RAW codec from a RED camera, ARRI camera, you should probably set it to same as timeline, so it just doesn't apply another input tag on any of these codecs. And timeline color space, you definitely need something with a wider color space. So what I would recommend here is using DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, which is a super high wide gamut color space, which provides you, which doesn't even, I think it's almost impossible to get any clipping from, gamut clipping from using this color space, which is amazing, which is a problem with Asus actually, which Asus 1.3 finally got a workaround for. But yeah, so yeah, this is, RCM setting up DaVinci Resolve Color Management is lots of work, and you can do lots of mistakes here. So what I would also recommend is like really spreading out the color space, because it definitely provides you with a nicer roll-off when you do HDR. And here you have more options. So what you would do here is choose Rec 709 2.4 if you have a Windows machine or a Linux machine. If you have a Mac, and use the internal screen and use the regular color profile, you definitely have to switch to this, because otherwise your output won't match what you see in DaVinci Resolve. That's also like a topic that pops up inside these DaVinci Resolve groups like every single day. So Rec 709A on an internal or any Apple screen, basically. And yeah, what you can also do here is there's just so many options, and this is actually quite simplified because I didn't switch to HDR here. If I switch to HDR, there are like at least 3 more options you can choose from. So it's insane. I don't know. So Asus, easygoing. You set it up. There you go. Done.
Nice.
Safe. Yeah. That's what I like about Asus. For DaVinci Resolve Color Management, I actually set up my own presets. So I exported them. I actually sent them to friends so they can use them too. So, because you can make so many mistakes setting up Resolve Color Management. So what it does for you now is, so basically, if I show you the image here, there's lots of stuff going on here. As you can see, there's also my B-RAW conversion LUT, which is another topic on its own. There's like a B-RAW vlog is ever so slightly different than a vlog recorded internally. And yeah, this is just a conversion which basically converts the B-RAW V-gamut to internal V-gamut, so that there's a proper match if you shoot B-RAW and internal vlog footage on the S1H or the S5 or any S-series camera basically that records B-RAW. I can't really confirm that this conversion works for the BGH1 or the GH5S though, so never tried that. But it definitely works on any S-series camera. It will definitely get you the same colors you would expect from an internal recording. And yeah, but let me turn this off right now. So this is basically what comes out of the camera with some color management. So what happens here is you have your B-RAW image, which is, let me also turn off the color management. So this is actually what you would get, a flat vlog image out of the RAW codec. And so what the color management does here, okay, it's a bit sensitive, the scrolling. There we go. Okay. So what the color management does for you is it applies an input transformation to the ASUS CCT color space in my place, which is a working color space, an intermediate timeline color space. And this is what happens here if I turn on the color management again. So what we can see here is a normalized image, but it doesn't look really that great. So just also a whole nother topic. It's not necessarily looking great, and what it also does at the other end, after the ASUS CCT color space, your timeline color space, what it does is it does a conversion to a display referred color space, which in this case is Rec 709. So all these things happen at the same time. So you're basically doing your grade inside a wrap. So you have your input transformation and you have your output transformation. The same thing happens when you use Davinci Resolve color management. It's just way more complicated, but also more advanced, I think, in many ways. Yeah. It's basically like using Android versus iPhone, I guess. So you have like way more options, but it can be confusing from time to time. Yeah, there's that. Yeah. So I think that's what it is. And everything that you can see here on the screen, it looks a bit messy right now because apparently I tried many different things in the past, and this project has been going on for quite a while. So but it's actually not that hard to get used to it. Just these things here that are darker are deactivated nodes, which I don't want to throw away yet, but I also don't want to use because they don't necessarily do what I want to do anymore. But these were like from older color grades. Just didn't throw them away yet. You just deactivated. That's what it is. And when I apply the grade, like if I turn it on, this is what you can see here. So you can actually see the faces. You have a qualifier. You have a window on his face actually, which follows him. And it's actually another project which I also did recently, where I used the magic mask. But I would probably give you an example later because this has been a mind-blowing experience over the past few months since Blackmagic was. Got that feature. It's really impressive. It recognizes people, cars, and everything, even if they disappear and reappear later. It noticed, I was tracking this person or this object before, and it just jumps back to it. I don't know how it does that, but it's super impressive. So yeah, there's that. And this is basically what's going on here. And if I go here to my group node, now it gets funny. What I use here in this compound node is actually a wrapper for my own dynamite LUT, which is interesting. Because if I turn this off, it actually still looks good. Yeah, because there's also, yeah. So what I'm trying to figure out now is actually porting all the LUTs I created in the past over to different color management systems, which are either ASUS or Davinci Resolve color management. And it has been quite a struggle, honestly, especially with Resolve color management, because if I do a color grade in Resolve Color Management in HDR, it doesn't really match what I see in SDR later. If I do the same thing in ACES though, the output, if I need like a really quick Rec 709 export from my HDR graded image, it actually looks exactly like I want it to look, which is also what I just figured out recently, because I basically just switched to the whole HDR thing like a few months ago, since I have this MacBook here. Yeah.
So like when like going through all of this and like, you know, kind of like figuring out like the color, the grain effect and stuff like that, how do you ever like kind of just get to the point where it's like where you want it to be? Like is that all kind of more of like a feel on just how you're looking at it and go for it, or is there typically like a set kind of goal that you're going towards with the grading?
So in color grading, like getting the right feeling is a really important aspect. Actually, you really need to know what is going on in the movie to transport actually the right emotions, which color grading definitely helps with. So if you have if you have like a tragic story, you don't really want to provide like super saturated colors. You need to find something that actually matches the theme of the movie and actually enhances it. That's actually one of the most important things in color grading. And what you should also do is like adhering to standards, which either Rec 709 or HDR ST 2084. And what I would also recommend is, even if you use a calibrated screen, is before you start color grading, is that you watch tons of movies on that particular screen, the one that you use for your color grading, so you actually get a feel for it. That is super important. That's not only the case with color grading, but also the same thing if you ever should master audio for a film or even music. It's the same thing. You actually need to adjust your ears or your eyes to the particular screen, headphones, or monitors you use to get decent results. Because just having a decent calibrated screen doesn't mean that you will get the results you want. You definitely need to make sure that your eyes adapt to these particular screens. That is also super important. So what I would definitely recommend is watch tons of movies on these screens, so you definitely know how a movie, like a properly color graded movie, is supposed to look, and that would definitely help you getting there.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, a really good tip. You know, hey, how many times like, you know, do you see in the different forums or in different conversations where it's like, you know, I bought this monitor, or I'm looking to buy this monitor, and you know, I got a color calibrator and everything should be perfect. It's like, no, I mean, technically, sure, it should be really close.
It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, like, you know, kind of training yourself, like you said, like getting yourself to understand, well, how does this display actually, when it says that it's correct, what do reds actually look like on this display? What do greens actually look like? Because
what does correct actually look like? Yes.
Yeah, because one of the things that I always found amazing is that, like, you could have two identical monitors next to each other, calibrated the same way, and they will both still look they will look different from each other. They shouldn't.
That could happen if you have different technologies. Like if you have an OLED screen and an LCD, they may look identical to your eyes, but if you ever capture them on your camera, they may look entirely different because they use a completely different spectral, how's it called? I read that somewhere, but there was an explanation for that I read recently, which is why screens may look identical to your eyes, but look completely different on the camera. Yeah. Especially if you have different types of screens like OLED, mini LED, which is also LCD. Yeah, these look completely different on cameras. You can't really trust what a camera sees. Looks completely different than what your eyes see. Yeah. But even then, they may actually measure correctly on a spectrometer, how do you pronounce that word?
The spectrometer?
Yes.
Yes, that
They
one.
may measure correctly and they look correctly to your eyes, but your cameras will definitely see completely two completely different things,
Yeah.
which is super interesting. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so what happened recently was that I was calibrating my view assist to with a display cal, and so I created a 3D LUT which I put on this on the what is it called, the Blackmagic View Assist, and it looked correct it basically looked correct to my eyes, and it was also correctly measured. But when you I was trying to send an example to a friend, and I was noticing that it doesn't look anything like the OLED on the camera, but it looked absolutely correct to my eyes. So I was like, how am I wanted to show him that I have like a perfectly matching BMD Blackmagic View Assist next to my OLED screen, which was also calibrated with Canon with a probe and everything. It looks amazing. Both screens looked amazing next to each other, but yeah, I wasn't able to show him a picture of how great it looks because both screens look completely different. Yeah. That's also when you see lots of setups from colorists who show their calibrated studio monitor next to their client display, which is usually an OLED, which also measures quite correctly, especially in SDR. These OLED screens, these LG OLED screens are amazing for SDR color grading. And whenever you see these setups on pictures, you see these comments like, yeah, these screens, they don't match. Which monitor do you trust? Yeah, this is literally the same issue I ran into. So
oh man.
these screens look identical to your eyes, but they look completely different on cameras. Like something is completely off. So like some of these screens must be completely off, but no, that's not the case. It's just how a camera actually captures different types of screens. It's
Yeah.
super interesting. Sorry, I can maybe probably show one more tip I would definitely
Yeah.
recommend in a regular workflow, which is what everyone is asking me like literally all the time, to achieve the right exposure with either underexposed or overexposed or exposed footage. If you don't use any color management, just grab one of the Rec 709 LUTs. I would show one of these newer ones here, which I'm still working on. And in case you want to adjust exposure, just create a node before, or if you use Premiere, do it like above in Lumetri. So basically add the LUT as a creative node, as a creative LUT, and do your exposure adjustments before. So what you can do now here is you basically get to your offset slider, which if you work scene referred, which basically means before your Rec 709 conversion, it almost reacts like the exposure slider when you shoot RAW, which is super handy. And if you need to adjust the color, also go to your offset and.
Oh,
I
think I
right now, so yeah, I need to adjust that. So.
I think the mic got a little muffled there.
Oh, okay, sorry. So yeah, so now we have a better view. So in case you really need to adjust your image, to use offset, use your printer lights. That's how they're called. So, but sorry. Yeah, actually, you don't have my keyboard set up for this. So what I will do here now is what you can see here is that we have a strong magenta tint over here. It's like the whole image is in this kind of red to magenta bluish area here on the vector scope. So what I will do here now is grab the offset, basically just try to center the image. And what you can see here now is that colors are actually aligning. Like skin tones look correct. If I turn this off now, you can see everything is purple and magenta. And now this is just with the offset. You get like the easiest control over your white balance ever. And you can, especially if you have 12-bit footage like Blackmagic RAW, I would still, yeah, you can still use that instead of the RAW tools, because honestly, it's much easier to go from like a really wrong image to a correct looking image just using that, just use your offset. You can use it for log footage, you can use it for raw footage, which is another thing. So if you shoot log and raw footage and need to correct your white balance, if you just use your offset, you basically have the same workflow for both 10-bit log footage and 12-bit raw footage. And yeah, it's super easy to use. You basically just have to adjust, try to center these areas here in the center of the vector scope, and this will give you correct skin tones, and everything will just align easily. And what I would do here now is also a correction, maybe not a correction, but an adjustment after our offset, our printer lights, since the exposure is already where I want it to be, not too bright, not too dark, but kind of moody. I just want to probably add a little bit more contrast, which I probably just using a slight curve adjustment. So I will lower my shadows over here and add a bit more oomph into the midtones with a simple S-curve adjustment.
Yeah.
This is probably a bit too crunchy already, but you can see where it goes. It's like easy.
Yeah.
There you go. This is not a bad looking image. So just a Rec 709 conversion. And now with some simple adjustments, you can achieve a great looking image out of a log image in like a few seconds. Easy to go. You can create your stills in Davinci Resolve, and you can basically just create groups in Davinci Resolve, which is like a whole nother topic. So if you have a scene where you have the same exposure, same weird white balance, you can just add every single clip of that scene to a group, and every single clip of that group, if you add these adjustments to a post group, will literally look like you intended to, and you don't have to do any further adjustments. And what you can also do if you have one camera, if you have one particular camera and another camera, and if you don't use a color managed workflow, is you just create different groups for different cameras, which is also what I do. If I use a DJI drone and have to match that with my vlog footage from my S1H or GH6, what I do is I create different groups for my DJI drone, and I create different groups for my Panasonic cameras. And what I can do here now is I assign the DJI clips, every single one of them. Like I select different clips here. You can do that with the command or the control button on a Windows machine, and just select the clips that are basically your Panasonic clips. You assign these to your Panasonic group, and you assign all the other clips to your DJI group, in my case. And cool. This way, you basically have a nice little setup for different cameras, different log formats, and it's honestly not that hard to do. And I would always recommend, especially on the S1H and on the GH6, to use vlog if you shoot on these newer cameras. On like an old camera like the GH5, you didn't necessarily have the dynamic range advantage, but if you shoot a vlog on S1H, you get like 2 or 3 additional stops over the Rec 709 profiles, which is massive.
Yeah.
So you actually really make use of the available dynamic range. And honestly, even shooting log at night, like in this example here, which is the reason why I put this example here is, in the first place, is you can shoot log at night and you get super stunning results. You don't have to worry about overexposure in your inside. Yeah. Inside, you get all the dynamic range. If I would have shot this this particular clip in like a Rec 709 profile, either my shadows would have been crushed or my highlights would have been clipped. Yeah. But since I shot this in vlog, I actually still get a clean image, which, yeah, this one here was shot at ISO 4000, which is something that was unheard of when I was shooting vlog on the GH5 back then. It was super grainy. But on cameras like even the GH6, you can easily shoot ISO 4000 at night in vlog. It's not an issue. You just have to make sure that you don't underexpose at night, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's honestly amazing how in depth all of these conversations can go. You know, like we through the entire thing, it's like, oh, you know, like, well, this is an offshoot that we can go to, and this is one, and this is one, and
Yeah.
What I think would be cool is, if everyone that's watching, wants to see more of this or has like a certain area, like we can actually maybe, kind of figure out like, let's talk about this one time and we can have you back on and kind of go through some of that stuff if you'd like to.
I would love to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
But for today, unfortunately, we are out of time for today. So
I can imagine. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm also pretty sure that it's really late there where you are. So sleep is probably a good thing for you. So
it actually is, and I have another job in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, let's wrap up this one today. So where can everyone kind of like check out your work? I know you have the LUTs that you have for sale and stuff. Where can they find all that stuff? I know we did put links in the description, but go for it.
So people can definitely see my work and the work I'm doing, which I have been doing with my friend for like over 6 years already, on my webpage, 55media.net, and also on the other social media links that are provided under the video, under the stream. And yeah, I hope you guys like it.
Yeah.
What you can see there.
Yeah.
So much. There's so much. There's so many videos from like back in 2016 already. It is crazy.
No,
honestly, the work still holds up to a certain degree.
Yeah, so definitely.
It's not bad. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's still something I can show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for taking the time and running late over there for you. This was super fun, and I really look forward to having you come back on the stream. I'm sure everyone in the audience enjoys it too. So yeah, thank you, Dennis, again for spending the time and sharing some of your knowledge with us. For everyone that was watching, obviously this is a relatively truncated interview, given the fact that we only typically run for an hour and how much in general, avenues you can go to have a conversation about color grading. We're 100%, on point with what we were saying at the end there, that these are topics that I want to expand further into, right? On these streams, we've done a lot of interviews, we've done a lot of, kind of tech conversations, obviously very heavily focused on the camera equipment itself, but knowing that grading and photo editing, depending on which area, you kind of focus on, those are very important aspects. And as I said, I think they are relatively, kind of underrepresented in these kinds of platforms. So definitely let us know in the chat, in the comments below the video after it's posted, what kinds of color grading topics do you want? I've already seen, some asks in the chat, and this is what helps us, develop these streams further and further as we go throughout the year and into next year, or what I call like our season 4 for these streams. So definitely sound off in the chat, sound off in the comments with what kinds of color grading topics or photo editing topics you want to see us dive into more, and we'll work on getting, different experts in these different areas to come in and, provide some tips and some guidelines for you. As we were going through the stream here, and we've got a few more minutes for today's broadcast before I have to call it today. A couple of the different questions that came in, or the comments here was, Martin asking, wondering if anyone knows how to make HLG footage into YouTube compatible HDR. And I've done it a couple of times. And obviously I am no expert on this. Actual color graders are way better at doing this stuff. This is what, people do for a living. But one of the easiest things, if you just want to start playing around with HDR content on platforms like YouTube, they have an entire location on their website. If you just do HDR uploads on YouTube, just Google search that, it does give you the guidelines, what to set your color primaries to, what file formats you want to output them to and send up. If you're someone who shoots HLG right in a LUMIX camera, there are some things that you can skip there because the HLG profile is designed specifically as a deliverable. It was, for everybody out here, the HLG profile is not designed as a profile that you're really supposed to edit. And I think it's part of the interview that I had to cut out for time. We were talking about how early on in the release, when HLG was really starting to, hit with these cameras, a lot of people have been using that as a grading platform, and then now realizing that, well, if you just use log and you use proper conversions and you follow, a lot of the tips that Dennis was talking about, you're going to get an infinitely better product out of it. And you're not going to have to deal with, kind of issues that working in a 4208-bit HEVC file that was only ever really designed for delivery, you get to bypass a lot of that stuff. So, Martin, for your question with HDR onto YouTube, yeah, there's a couple ways. You can do it straight with HLG right out of the camera if you nail your exposure and you nail your white balance, or you get it really close, and YouTube should handle it pretty well. The part that I think a lot of people miss on YouTube uploads for HDR is that unless you provide them with an SDR conversion, it's going to do their generic SDR conversion for you, which may not look like how you want it to look. So editing and then putting the output out is what you want to make sure you do. He says, no issue with working on HLG. The issue is with YouTube showing the HDR logo next to the quality settings. That's actually a very simple thing. What browser are you using? If you're watching YouTube on an Apple product and you're using Safari, a lot of times you will not see the HDR icon there. It won't display you HDR. When you are on Google or Chrome, you will see it. This is something, I'm not sure if this is a Google thing, just preventing or having issues with displaying the stuff on Safari. But the other thing to make sure of is what you're outputting. So if you're editing that HLG footage and you are exporting it out, you have to make sure that you follow YouTube's information so that it knows what the HDR footage is and what to do with it. If it doesn't know what to do with it, it's just going to show out as SDR. You say you've tried all browsers in Windows 10. So most likely, there's probably, if you are editing the footage and you are then exporting it from your software, there is a step that's missing in the export for the color primaries, for what the display format is, that, again, if you go to YouTube's website, they will tell you what you need to put it in as, and what files are accepted for displaying HDR. The other thing that I've noticed too is that HDR footage, and especially if you're doing 4K, does take a while to process. Shouldn't take that long, but yeah, it's basically make sure that you are outputting the proper flags for YouTube, and that's not just going to be a Panasonic thing. That's going to be making sure that your format is exported in what YouTube is expecting. You can grade any camera, and if you don't have the right output for YouTube, then yeah, YouTube's not going to know what to do with it. We can definitely look at doing a kind of a quick hit of, hey, these are the settings if you want to upload for YouTube, to make sure your export settings are right, whether you're using, Resolve, or if you're someone like me who, kind of tries to brute force this stuff through Premiere. Yeah, we can take a look at doing that. It'd be relatively LUMIX specific, but that's going to be really a general output process, because it would be something that affects all of the cameras out there. Let's see here. Derek says, I keep seeing videos with B-Raw and ARRI, but we almost never see LUMIX exclusive grading. Yeah, this is something that I want to start to try to shift some of this stuff. Provide some more of this kind of content on our channel so you have access to it. The truth is, color grading across the board, whether you're using B-Raw or ARRI or Red, or you're working with Vlog, a lot of the principles are all going to be the same. As Dennis pointed out, it's a lot of making sure that your program is set up, and then you put the footage in and you work with it. So it's going to kind of depend. As far as specifically to LUMIX, yeah, we definitely can look at doing a stream where, it's an end-to-end LUMIX workflow for it. And I'm pretty sure even some of the other creators out there, like Photo Joseph, have done some stuff as well. So yeah, we'll look at adding some stuff like that to our programming. Let me see if we got any other questions. I got about 1 more minute before I have to call today's stream. Yeah, looks like we've got pretty much all the questions answered to the biggest point here. So, yeah, with that, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you again, Dennis, for spending time last night to jump onto the interview with me. This was a really fun conversation. It's one of those that, for I think the 35 or almost 40 minutes that we had the conversation here, there is still probably about another, hour to half hour to an hour of content that couldn't make it for the stream today. So this is definitely a topic that we are going to be readdressing probably after the new year, just with the way the holiday season kind of rolls up for us, and then me being on the road actually a lot for the next couple of weeks and into the first week of January. So we will be looking at doing more of these. As I said throughout the stream, let us know in the comments after the video what kinds of topics like this you want to see, what areas of color grading or photo editing you want us to know. If you drop them in the comments, that allows me to track them and be able to actually then act on them. So definitely do that. If you liked this content, if you liked what you learned today and you want to see more of it, make sure to give us a like on the video. That helps us kind of make sure this is the area that we want to be getting more information in and devoting more time to. And if you don't already and you feel that we deserved it, maybe give us a subscribe. Again, we do these streams every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. They are built for the community and from the community. So, yeah. Programming note, next week is going to be a recorded stream. I am unfortunately out on the road, so we're going to be recorded next week. I'm still working out what the topic's going to be, but it's probably going to be something a little more photo-focused, since we did very video-focused today. And then we'll be back live the following week, and then the last 2 weeks of December are going to be recorded as I take a break for the holidays here in the U.S. Actually, the next 3 streams after that are going to end up being recorded. For those that keep an eye on the major trade shows and stuff like that going on, CES is happening at the beginning of January, so it's like the first week of January. I will be out at the show in Las Vegas for the duration, so we will be doing some LUMIX Lives from the show. I think our plan is to do them from the actual show floor. So definitely tune in, get subscribed if you're not already, the bell icon, all that fun stuff. You'll get yourself notifications when we go live with those events. Other than that, thank you everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Hope you have a great weekend. And yeah, get out there, create some cool stuff, and share it with us. We love to see all the stuff that you all create out there. So yeah, take care.